All right, this is a walkthrough to get you started with the editing process if you're doing the Art Terrarium video. So if you're in the group that did the Art Terrarium, this is the video for you to watch. If you're in a different group, I have a different tutorial video for you to take a look at just to help you get started. This is not going to be a step-by-step walkthrough of everything to do for editing this project, but it's just going to get you started. You should, once you have all the files, they're on your computer or on the computer in the lab, you'll want to make sure you open up that folder called Art Terrarium. It should just be on your desktop, just where you put it in our last class, and you'll have a 5-folder setup right here. You've got an audio folder here. It has your voiceover. It also has 2 audio files from that interview. You have an empty exports file folder, an empty graphics folder, an empty projects folder, and a media folder with your 2 cameras. So I've already done all that organization for you. Next thing is to open up Premiere on your computer. I'm going to go ahead and I've already got it open. If it doesn't show up on your dock, if you don't see that, you can use the Spotlight tool right here, type in Premiere, and you'll see it there. And I'm going to go ahead and click New Project. Okay, now Premiere, in case you've forgotten how this works, Premiere likes to start you with like a generic project, you know, with their own like test footage and that sort of thing. We don't need any of that though, because we already know how to do all this. Up here where it says project name, you're going to call it Art Terrarium and then your name. Make sure you have the name of the place you're going. And then under project location, this is really important. If you don't choose anything here, it's just going to save it in some random folder in your computer. It won't save it in that 5-folder setup. We need to tell Premiere, please save it in that 5-folder setup. Under project location, go to choose location, and then find on your computer, find that 5-folder setup. I've got it here behind a whole bunch of other folders here, but it should just be on your desktop, and save it into this projects folder in your 5-folder setup. Then click choose. Okay, then these options on the right, it's going to have some options here: copy media, new bin, create new sequence. We can uncheck all of these. These are things, this is like kind of educational stuff that Premiere is doing. We don't need it to do any of this stuff for us. We're going to have a blank Premiere project. So uncheck all of those, click on create, and I should have a blank Premiere project. I've got 4 panels open here. I've got my source panel, my program panel, my timeline panel, and my project panel. Of course, they're all empty right now. If you've got some other panels, sometimes there's a panel that shows up here on the right. It's kind of an educational panel or something like that. I think it's called the Learn panel. Let's see if I can open that up. Yeah, if you have this Learn panel that's here or something and you don't want it, you can just click on this little hamburger menu right here and choose Close Panel, and it'll get rid of that panel. Okay, so I've got my 4 panels. It's time to import some media. So keep Premiere open and just go down to Finder, the blue face down here, and find your media folder. Find your 2 folders here. You've got your audio folder and your media folder. You can just drag both of them. Let's do one at a time. Let's take the audio folder. I'm just going to click, drag, and then click in here in this projects panel. Same thing with media. I'm going to click, drag, and click. There we go. And it might take a minute to import that media. It's there now though. And then once I've imported that, I'm just going to go ahead and do File, hit Save, just so that everything is saved. I just like to save frequently, every once in a while. Okay, next step here is to figure out what we're going to do. We're going to actually make a sequence, and we're just going to make a sequence from scratch. So I'm going to go up to Sequence, or actually, sorry, File, and then New Sequence. Just going to make a new sequence from scratch. I'm going to choose, instead of Sequence Presets, I'm just going to go to Settings. In Editing Mode, I'm just going to choose Custom. And then this is how I'm making it from scratch. My time base is going to be 29.97 frames per second. That's the frame rate that your cameras were shooting on. Frame size will be 1920 by 1080. The rest of this I can ignore. Video previews 1920 by 1080, that's fine. And then my sequence name down here at the bottom, I need to give this sequence a name. I'm going to call this Art Terrarium, my name. I'm giving this sequence that name because it's the main sequence, and it's also the name that your video will have when you upload it. Actually, you know what? I'm going to call this Art Terrarium KC Rough Cut. That's what I'm going to call this sequence. Make sure you add rough cut to the end of that. And then just click on OK. I've got a sequence, empty sequence, right? Let's go ahead down here in the project panel. Let's make a sequences folder. By the way, if your project panel looks like this, where you can see the folders and this sort of thing, that's fine, but I prefer to do this list mode, which I get by clicking right here. That way I can actually open up these folders and kind of preview what's inside them. And that's just how I like to do it. I am going to make a sequences folder though, so I can right click here and do new bin. Or if you can't right click, you can just go down here where this little folder is and choose new bin. I'm going to call it sequences because we're going to have a couple of sequences actually. But this one that's called rough cut is like my main sequence. And I'm just going to drag it into that sequences folder. Okay, cool. If for some reason I were to close this and I had an empty timeline, I could always go to my sequences folder, find that sequence, and open it right up. All right. Okay, my next step is actually going to be to get my audio here from my voiceover. I'm going to drop this into one of my tracks here because this audio is kind of like the backbone of my whole thing. But first, I'm going to actually make this sequence a little bit bigger, and I'm going to find I've got 3 video tracks and 3 audio tracks. I want to make this, they're all really narrow. They're all really short tracks right now. I want to make this audio track that I'm about to drop my voiceover into a little bit taller. So if I move my mouse over here, kind of next to this little microphone symbol, in between 2 tracks, my mouse becomes this kind of funny looking double arrow thing. If I click and drag, I can make that track a bit bigger, right? I'm going to do the same thing like with my main video track here. Just make those ones a little bit bigger. That way the preview will be a little bit bigger. Okay, I'm going to take my voiceover now and just drag and drop into here. Great. Okay, and then I have my voiceover. You can listen to it. I can go ahead and hit play.
If you're visiting Des Moines in the winter, prepare to bundle up. And if you need a break from the snow, you can find it at the Art Terrarium.
All right, so that's what the voiceover sounds like. It's going to be familiar. It's my voice for now. We're going to have a different voice for this for your final cut, but for the first cut, it's going to be my voice. We'll be able to replace that. It'll be really easy to replace it for the final cut. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit so I can see. And the nice thing is I can see my waveforms right here. You know, when I made the track a little bit bigger, I could see my waveforms. So I have that. I have the voiceover. What we're going to try to do here is this voiceover is basically, it can be kind of the structure for this video. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to cut out the first part here before I start speaking. I'm going to use my cut tool and just cut that. Then use my select tool, select that little bit, and then I can just move this over that way. So I just start immediately with,
if you're visiting Des Moines in the winter, prepare to bundle up. And if you need a break from the snow, you can find it at the Art Terrarium, a unique houseplant shop in Des Moines East Village, where it's summer all year long. It's also where local residents...
All right, so I've got my first kind of bit of what I'm saying here, the first bit of my voiceover. And I have to decide, like, I want to have some video on top of this. I want to have some B-roll to go on top of this, right? So I'm going to choose B-roll clips. Now, this is up to you. You can choose the B-roll that you want to choose. So I'm going to go into your media folder, and you can go into camera A, or whichever one you want to. And then to see each individual video file, you can just click on it, and you can see a preview. Now, this is from our interview. We're going to save this for a little while. Let's go through and find some of the B-roll that you filmed. Let's find some of that. And I can just kind of scroll through this to see that B-roll as I go. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for B-roll that was filmed with each camera here. And I can see, you know, I've got a nice pan shot here. If I click here, I can see more of these. What I'm doing is I'm double clicking on the little icon right here. That's what allows me to see the preview of each of those clips right up here. Now, this actually is perhaps a good use for this other viewing mode right here, this icon view. You can see the folders, and I'll explain why. So if you do icon view, and then I go into my media folder, it's going to open up that bin in a tab like this. So you still have your main project tab right here. You can put that back in list view, but this bin will be in a folder view like this. And then I can click on camera A. This actually allows me to get a kind of a preview of each of my clips. So when you're viewing it in icon view, that's one use of it. The only thing that's confusing about using icon view is every time you open a folder, it opens it up in one of these tabs like this. And sometimes students get kind of lost, like, where's my main stuff? Where are all my folders? The project tab is where you want to go. That's where you're going to see all of your folders together. I think it's really important for that to be in list mode. But if you want to open up an individual folder into its own tab, and then be able to get a preview of kind of the clips like this, that is totally fine. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of looking through the B-roll, and actually if you move your mouse like over the clip, you can actually see kind of a preview of what that looks like. Sometimes, yeah, here we go. So I can actually kind of scrub through it. It's a very easy editing tool. It's really fun to kind of just get a preview, a very tiny preview of every clip. So that's really fun. So this is all the clip that was filmed with, all the footage that was filmed with camera A, just taking a look at all of it. And I think there's a lot of great footage here that you filmed. I've also got camera B. Let's look at some of the footage that was filmed with that. I want to actually choose some outside footage for this first part because in the voiceover, I'm talking about Des Moines in the winter, right? So I'm going to go to my timeline here. I'm just going to play back what I wrote, what I said here.
If you're visiting Des Moines in the winter, prepare to bundle up. And if you need a break from the snow, you can find it at the Art Terrarium.
So an option that you might do is if you are visiting Des Moines in the winter, prepare to bundle up. I was just going to have a clip of some winter footage here. If I double click on this here, I can kind of see it in the preview. I can see the snow, you know, I've got a nice little pan here. And I'm going to go ahead and choose part of this clip to open up with. Now, I don't need all of it, right? I don't need maybe the very beginning here. I kind of just want the pan part here. So I'm going to move my playhead over to where that pan starts, just right about there. And I can click on this little bracket right here. It says Mark In, or I can also just use the I key on my keyboard. What I'm telling Premiere is I'm about to drag this over into my timeline, but I only want to drag from this point forward. And I can also find an out point here, where that pan ends, about here. Choose an out point, or just choose O on my keyboard, and I can click and drag this over into here. Now, this is what's happening here. This is annoying. When I'm dragging this video file into my timeline, it's taking the audio part of that video file and it's going to cover up my voiceover. I don't want it to do that. So before I drag anything over here on the left, you see these kind of blue highlight tab things here. This is actually telling Premiere where you want to drop stuff. If I click over here, I'm going to tell Premiere, actually, I want you to drop an audio track into that second track instead of into that first track. And that's what I want it to do. It's going to drop that right there. I'm going to actually open up, expand that a little bit so I can see the waveforms a bit better there. And let's take a look here.
If you're visiting Des Moines in the winter, prepare to bundle up.
After I say bundle up, I think I want to see another clip here. So I will take, let's take maybe a look at this clip here where I talk about the Art Terrarium. I think it's a nice looking clip. And I'll just drag the whole thing over here and I can cut it down if I need to. Just have it right there.
If you're visiting Des Moines in the winter, prepare to bundle up. And if you need a break from the snow, you can find it at the Art Terrarium.
So I've got the Art Terrarium, and then I'm going to go ahead and, you know, just shrink this clip down a little bit. This is all stuff you know how to do. As soon as I say Art Terrarium, I want to see the inside of the Art Terrarium. So I'm going to go to I've got my camera B bin here. I can close this bin here that's called Media. I've got my camera B bin, my camera A bin. I'm just going to find some B-roll that is going to be an appropriate kind of opener for the Art Terrarium. I kind of want a wide shot of the inside now. Maybe something like this might be appropriate. Yeah, maybe. This is up to you. You can find what you think might work. This might be a good clip. I like that there's a little bit of movement happening there. And so, yeah, I'm going to choose that as my in point and then choose an out point right there, just using the I and O keys. Move this down into here. So as soon as I say Art Terrarium,
In the snow, you can find it at the Art Terrarium, a unique houseplant shop in Des Moines East Village.
and really I'm just, at this point, I'm just kind of taking B-roll, right? I've got a nice establishing shot there. Maybe I want to choose another detail or something like that. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have a new shot every few seconds or so. You don't want to hold on to one shot for too long. You notice that like each of my shots here is around 3 to 4 seconds long here.
Where it's summer all year long. It's also where local residents leave family.
So I'm kind of cutting this down. Now, if you can hear the sound right now, you can hear, you'll probably be able to hear that the sound of the store itself, the sound that was picked up on the camera's microphone, is way louder than my voiceover here. Let's take a listen.
Winter, prepare to bundle up. And if you need a break from the snow, you can find it at the Art Terrarium, a unique houseplant shop.
And that's like it's really mixed poorly. Now, I'm not super worried about that for this rough cut. We're going to fix most of that in the final cut. We'll fine tune that in the final cut. But if it's making it hard for you to edit, and the sound is not super important on these video tracks, you can just mute a video track here so we're not really hearing it in the B-roll. But if you want to turn it down as well, you can turn down each track here. What you'll need to do is you need to make the track where that audio is bigger. Just have to make it a little bit wider here. I'm actually going to zoom in a bit too. Right now I don't see any waveforms like I do in my voiceover here. That's just because it has to load. But I'm going to, if the track is a bit wider, if it's a bit taller like this, I'm going to see a horizontal line like this that's going right around the middle here. If I move my mouse right over that line, my mouse changes into a mouse with some arrows. This is my volume level of that track. I can click and drag this to pull it down, and you'll see a number here. It says minus some number of decibels. If I go down to minus 999 decibels, that's going to be basically muting it. If I go down to minus 20 or so, I should notice a big difference.
Visiting Des Moines in the winter, prepare to bundle up.
Notice a big difference between before and after. I like to hear a little bit of the sound.
If you're visiting Des Moines in the winter, prepare to bundle up.
And we can mix this later for the final cut, but I'm just going to drag these tracks down roughly about here. Just so that it's not too loud. It might be different depending on the environment, how much sound there was, if there was construction or something like that. But again, if you want to, if it's not important to you right now to hear it, we're going to mix the sound later. You can go ahead and choose mute here to mute the whole track. Or you can actually even just solo the voiceover track if you want to as well.
If you need a break from the snow, you can find it at the Art Terrarium, a unique houseplant shop in Des Moines East Village, where it's summer all year long. It's also where local resident Katie Benham.
All right. Last thing, or one of the last things I'm going to show you, I introduced Katie Benham here. It's also where resident Katie Benham learned to love plants.
Katie Benham learned to keep her beloved plants alive.
Okay, so I'm about to introduce Katie Benham, she's the person that you talked with. As soon as I finish saying what I say here, we're going to hear an interview quote from here. You're going to choose an interview quote from her. So after I've finished with my waveforms here, you can kind of see when I'm done speaking, if you can see the waveforms here. I'm going to use my cut tool. I'm going to cut this. I'm basically cutting my voiceover. And I'm just going to move the rest of this voiceover somewhere over here, right? Because I actually want to hear Katie speaking. I want to fill, what's going to fill this space is some more footage of Katie speaking, Katie talking in the interview. To do that, I need to create a multi-camera sequence because you talk to her with multiple cameras. So I'm going to find my two bins here, my camera B, my camera A bin. I'm going to go ahead and close them here. I'm going to close this panel, close this panel. I'm going to go back to just my projects panel here. I'm going to have it in list mode. I'm going to make a new folder for my multi-camera sequence because I'm going to take just the footage from the interviews and drop it in this multi-camera sequence folder. So I'm going to make a new folder here. I'm going to call it multicam sequence. Okay. Then I'm going to open up my media folder here. I'm going to find the footage that was for the interview. This, I think, was test footage. And this is actual inner footage. I'm going to actually move this so it's not in this camera A folder anymore. It's going to be in this multicam sequence folder here. The rest of this, I think, was just like, when you're tearing down. Okay, and let's find camera B. And same thing. Let's find where you interviewed her, which footage was the interview footage from camera B. Just kind of clicking through to find it. Which one was that? It's around here somewhere. Maybe it's closer to the beginning. Because I know you did. There we go. I think it's this one here.
They were hiring for management.
Okay, and I'm going to take this one here and move it into that multicam sequence here. So I've got a new bin that I created. It's just got the two different camera angles from the interview itself. So the footage from the interview itself, okay? What I'm going to do, and what I also need to do is I need to hit my audio from that interview. I also want to have that in this multicam sequence folder. So I'm going to open up this audio folder.
Is if you could just actually drew you to
And then let's listen to her audio.
Terrarium. How did you get involved here? How did that start?
I always went shopping for plants at our terrarium.
So I'm going to choose the audio track that's the best here because you recorded with two mics, which is really smart. I'm going to choose the one that sounds the best to me of her speaking. And make sure you're wearing headphones as you're doing this.
So live, it definitely kept me coming back because I would have to replace the ones that I killed. And after years of coming here,
I think they both sound good. I'm going to go with this second one here, and I'm just going to drop it into that multicam sequence folder. So now my multicam sequence has three things in it. It's got my first camera angle, my second camera angle, and my third camera, and my audio right here. Okay. Next thing that I need to do, is this. I need to actually, I know this is going to be a little bit confusing, but it's going to make your life a little bit easier. I need to make both of these camera angles into their own sequence, into their own like sequence. We're going to have sequences within sequences here. The reason I'm doing this is it's going to allow me to make adjustments to the toning of the color correction and things like that. So I'm going to find this first one here. It's just a bunch of numbers.mp4. Going to right click, and I'm going to do new sequence from clip. Okay, and you notice I've got a new sequence right here, right? It shows up right here. It's got the interview with the camera A, it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and change the name of this sequence. Right now the sequence's name is just a bunch of numbers. If I just click once on those numbers here, I'm looking at the sequence, I'm going to change this to camera A. All right. I do the same thing for camera B. So camera B is this MVI, a bunch of numbers. I'm going to right click. I'm going to new sequence from clip. So do the same thing here. It's got a new sequence called MVI, a bunch of numbers. Let's change the name of this sequence to camera B. All right, so now in my multicam sequence folder, I've got 5 things now. I've got the original footage from camera A, got the original footage from camera B. I've got a sequence that I created for camera A and a sequence that I created for camera B. This will be something that we need so that if we want to do color correction later on for the final cut, it's going to make that color correction process a lot easier. If you don't do this, if you don't make sequences out of these clips here, then you will be doing color correction on each individual tiny little cut that you make to your final timeline here, and that will be a huge pain. Okay, I can actually, for now, I can close these little sequences that are shown up here in my timeline. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a multi-camera source sequence here. Here's what I need to do. The first thing I need to click on. I'm going to click on my Zoom audio, whatever thing here, Zoom wave. This is my main audio, right? I'm going to click on that first. It's really important you click on that first. Then I'm going to hold the Command key on my keyboard. It's right next to the space bar. And I'm going to click on camera B and camera A. It's really important that the first thing you click on is the audio one because that's going to be the audio for this multi-camera sequence. Then I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to create multi-camera source sequence. Okay. It should be set to custom here. That's fine. You want to have it a custom name. I'm going to call this my interview sequence. That's what I'm going to call it. Or interview. I'm going to call it interview source actually because it's called a source sequence. Here I'm going to choose audio is how it's going to sync. The sequence preset is fine. It can be automatic. I'm going to, if it says move source clips into processed clip spin, just uncheck that. We're going to uncheck this box right here. And then camera settings are fine. Audio channels is going to be mono. That's fine. And then we can go ahead and click OK. What it's going to do is it's going to synchronize those 2 camera angles, and it's going to make the audio that you recorded with the Zoom recorder, it's going to make that the audio. It's going to synchronize all of them together into a multi-camera sequence, just like you did with your multi-camera interview. Just give it a minute. Okay, so now I have this another sequence now. I've got another thing in my multi-camera sequence folder here. It's called interview source. I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to choose new sequence from clip. Okay, this is my interview source sequence here. If I listen to it, I can hear.
Oh, definitely. I would get a lot of advice from
It's the good quality audio from the interview. Now, right now, I can only see one camera angle. I will show you how to make it so that you can see multiple camera angles. Right now, both of my camera angles are in this sequence, but right now I can only see one. Let me show you how to make it so you can see both camera angles. So on your program panel here, you've got a bunch of tools down here. Now, you might already have this set this way from when you did the multi-camera interview, but in case you don't, you want to see this little icon right here. It says Toggle Multi-Camera View. If you can't see that icon, click on the little plus sign, and there are a bunch of icons here that you can choose, and you can just drag and drop this icon into your little panel down here and click OK. When I click on it, look at that. I can see all of my camera angles. What this allows me to do is it allows me to change which camera angle is being used when. Okay, now that's really cool. I'm going to turn that off for now. So I have 2 sequences open in my timeline right now. I've got this one called Interview Source and this one called Art Terrarium. Here's what I can do. As soon as I talk about Katie Benham, who's the person you talked
It's
with,
also where local resident Katie Benham learned to keep her beloved plants alive.
as soon as I say that, I want to cut to an interview quote from Katie Benham. I want to cut to a quote from something that she said. I want to find a cool quote from what she said. Maybe a quote that's related to that voiceover. I'm not going to give you too much direction on that. I'm going to let you find the quote that you want. But if you're not sure, if you want to like look through what did she talk about, you can go through these travel shoot interview transcripts, find your interview transcript, and you can look through this transcript. I'm going to go ahead and sign in here. It's going to open up my Descript app here. And this just gives me a way to look through the transcript here, to look through the Art Terrarium transcript here. I think I've got it open here as well. And I can look through the things that she said in that interview. And I'm going to try to find, I'd like to try to find a quote from something that she said that's relevant. The first thing she said, it's where she learned how to, or what I say in the video, she learned how to keep plants alive. Now I actually already made kind of a little script here. I think I've got it pulled up. What I had planned for her to say was, I always went shopping for plants at Art Terrarium. Is the only plant I knew about. So I found that quote. And so I'm going to, look through my transcript and find, just find a quote that I want to be a good opening quote. Always want a good opening quote to be a high impact quote. So I'm going to find.
Mother nurturing, taking care of plants, has that improved? Have you been learning and gained?
Let's see. I'll just find a cool quote from where she starts.
While I didn't know how to keep plants alive, it definitely kept me coming back because.
Or something here, some sort of high impact quote.
I always went shopping.
Sure. So I like this. I always went shopping thing. I'm gonna just zoom in. I'm gonna cut out the
I always.
But I'm gonna say where she says I always. I'm going to use my cut tool here. I'm gonna cut out this part of that interview here.
Shopping for plants at Art Terrarium. It was the only plant store I knew about in the Des Moines area, and while I didn't know how to keep plants alive, it definitely kept me coming back because I would have to replace the ones that I killed.
Okay, so I really like this quote. It's a funny, high-impact quote. I think the audience will really like it. I'm going to cut these two parts here. So I'm just cutting out this quote here. I'm going to zoom out. So I've cut out just a little tiny part of the interview here. And I could actually just copy and paste this into my main sequence, into my rough cut sequence here. So I'm just going to I'm going to right-click and choose Copy. And I'm going to go to my main sequence here. Make sure to move your playhead somewhere so that it's not over any other footage, because this will actually end up covering up other footage. And then it's as simple as just, I think actually I can't right-click, but I can do Edit and then Paste. And it's going to paste in that interview clip. Now, what happened when I pasted that in is it actually covered up a little bit of my voiceover here. So I'm going to move this over a little bit more. If I need to zoom out, I just want to make sure that nothing's getting covered up here. And then pasting that in. And so this is pretty cool. I've got my interview kind of pasted in here. I'm going to move it over so it happens, so I hear this right after I'm done with my voiceover part here.
Plants alive.
I always went shopping for plants at Art Terrarium. It was the only plant store I knew about in the Des Moines area.
Okay, cool. So we have this cool quote here from her, but I would actually like to swap back and forth between camera angles because she kind of meanders a little bit, and I think it's just too long on one camera angle. So after she talks for a couple seconds.
Always went shopping for plants at Art Terrarium. It was the only.
So right after she says it was. Right after she says that, I want to switch to a different camera angle. So I'm going to use my cut tool. I'm going to cut this clip right there. Then I'm going to click on the second half that I just created, and I'm going to go into my multi-camera view. And then I can click on this camera angle. So now you can see here in the preview here, this part is from this angle, and this part is from this angle, right? And I could just cut back and forth. You did this when you edited your multi-camera interview.
In the Des Moines area.
So right after she says Des Moines area, let's say I want to cut back again to that first camera angle. I can do that just like this.
And while I didn't know.
She has this really long and, so I'm going to actually just cut that out entirely. That and is a little bit distracting. So I'm going to use my cut tool here. I'm going to cut this part out entirely, that big long and just move this over a bit. And your audience won't notice because you've switched camera angles.
Yeah. While I didn't know how to keep plants alive, it definitely kept me coming back.
And then I'm just going to do one more camera switch here. I like to switch cameras every couple of seconds or so just to keep viewers engaged.
Because I would have to replace the ones that I killed.
Now, you don't have to be super precise about cutting out every and or something like that. It's actually worse if you're switching between camera angles, you know, every half second or something like that. That looks worse than just having some and ums. If you can make those camera switches every 3 or 4 seconds or so, that's going to be fine. It's okay if they're not perfect. The only thing I really made sure to cut out there was that really long and, right, that she said. All right. Now I want to pull the rest of my voiceover over to here because I'm going to go back to my voiceover, back to some B-roll. I can just click in this empty space between her speaking and my voiceover, right click and ripple delete. And then I'm going to move my playhead over here. I just want to see, I'm going to go right back to my voiceover.
I killed.
The Art Terrarium does more than sell cool houseplants. They also provide educational services for novice plant owners and plant lovers.
You can kind of guess what's going to happen next here, right? On top of this voiceover where I'm saying here, I'm going to have more B-roll. Kind of like what I did right here at the very beginning. You choose that B-roll. I'm not going to tell you what B-roll to pick. You can pick what that B-roll is. Just make sure you're not holding on to one clip for too long. You can kind of see also, if you look at the waveforms, you can see these kind of gaps between the things that I said, right? There are these kind of long gaps. What I envision in these gaps is more interview footage. So if you want to, you can even like make a cut right here at the very end of what I say there. You can cut this little empty space out here, and I'm gonna kind of move this over. So on top of this VO, I'm gonna see some more clips of B-roll from the place, beautiful footage, and then after this VO, I'm gonna see more interview stuff. I'm gonna go into my interview source sequence, find the next quote that I want to use from Katie, and cut that out of here. Copy it, paste it so that it shows up right here, and just go back and forth. That's the editing process we're going to do. I want you to do this for the whole video. Now, a couple things that we haven't done that you don't need to do for this rough cut is there is no color correction. We haven't done that yet. But because you created a sequence for each of your camera angles, that's going to be really easy. We also haven't really perfected the sound mixing. It's okay if the sound is not perfect. A couple other things, we haven't done a graphic. We haven't given her, we should give her like a graphic down here on the right here saying her name and her title and things like that. Don't need to worry about that for the rough cut. But this is the process I want you to go through, and basically it's whenever I'm talking, we're looking at B-roll. Whenever Katie's talking, we're switching back and forth between cameras, and maybe we throw in some B-roll if we want to, until we wrap up the structure of the video. So that is the basic guide for this. When you're done, make sure that you save your project, and then please create an export. Go up to File, or actually you can actually here, you can just click on the Export tab right here to export this video. The file name is going to be Art Terrarium, your name, rough cut. It's the same name as your sequence. Location, again, it's going to have some random location. You need to click on this blue link here to give it the place to save it. Location, make sure to click on this little arrow right here so you have more options, and you're going to find that 5-folder setup. Find that 5-folder setup where your other stuff is. So I've got it here, and make sure to save it into this exports folder, and click on save. The format should be H.264. Just click on H.264. Match source adaptive high bitrate is fine, and we're exporting video, audio, all of that. Couple options here. You can send to media encoder. That will send it to a different program we'll export. You can also just click on export. If you click on export, you won't be able to use Premiere while it's exporting, and that's okay. I'm going to click on export. Again, what you're doing is more than what I did. I want you to continue continue where I went off. Okay, so you should see a notice here saying your video was exported successfully. If I open up my Finder and I go to my travel show, my Art Terrarium folder here, for some reason, I'm not sure why it did this. It saved my project here. I've got a couple new folders here. I've got this. All right, so once that's exported, you can go down to Finder and find your folder here. Find that folder with your 5-folder setup. You should see in this Art Terrarium folder, you should see an export right here. This is your export.
If you're visiting Des Moines in the winter, prepare to bundle up. And if you need a break from the snow, you can find it at the Art Terrarium.
Okay, so cool. That's your export. And then here's how to submit the assignment once you're ready. And by the way, your 5-folder setup might look different. There's some extra folders here that it's created, right? Let's actually go ahead and fix that situation here. I'm going to save my Premiere project, and I can go ahead and quit Premiere or just close it. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and quit Premiere. I'm going to take this this Premiere project. For some reason, it didn't save it in my projects folder. I'm just going to drop it into my projects folder. Also, it made these 2 other folders here, this auto save and audio previews. I'm going to drop these into the projects folder as well, just to do that. Okay, great. So now my Premiere project is in my projects folder, which is where I want it to be. Let's show you how to submit this now. I've got in my exports folder, I've got one thing. It's this Art Terrarium, your name, rough cut. This is what you need to turn in. You're not going to be able to turn it in just on Blackboard. So how I want you to turn it in is on our Blackboard page, find the shared files folder. Then under shared files, go to Fall 22. Go to the travel show folder, and then go to the folder for your project, Art Terrarium. Find this exports folder, and then just go into Finder again, find your export that you made, and it's just click, drag, and click. It's going to take a while for it to upload. It's a video file, right? You can see a progress if you click up here where it says uploading. Don't move away from this window until it's actually done uploading. So it'll say it's now available or it's done. That's fine. Okay, this is what you're submitting here. Now to submit the assignment, just go into our Blackboard page, find week 14. You can just here, all you need to submit here is a note letting me know you've completed the assignment. So that's all you do. I'll be able to look in this shared files folder to see your rough cut. Again, don't close don't close this tab until you know that the file is actually done exporting. And there's your export. I'll be able to look at it here, give you feedback, and then go from there. Now we're going to make some important changes for the final cut. We'll do some color corrections, some graphics, things like that. But this is what I need for the rough cut. I need to go through the entire video with that voiceover as kind of the guide and go from there. And then make sure to submit the export here. Okay, good luck.